Hello everyone. I wanted to go ahead and run through the process of creating a slideshow in Premiere Pro. I do have some tutorials listed under the project for the slideshow. However, sometimes, YouTube cannot keep up with Adobe because Adobe is very fast at launching new versions. And so sometimes the videos don't always match up. So keep in mind, if you are running through a tutorial on YouTube or LinkedIn Learning or something, and it doesn't match exactly, just try to understand that that is because Adobe has probably updated their software recently, and maybe they've moved something to a different location. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and show you in the new version of 2023 how to do the slideshow project. So first, I'm going to start with a new project in Premiere Pro, which I've already launched. I'm not going to select my media ahead of time. I am going to name this Katie slideshow. And I'm going to put this I'm going to choose the location. I have a spot on my desktop where I've got some images saved. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose that location as where I'm going to save this Premiere Pro project. Okay, so now let's go ahead and say create. Okay, I'm going to ignore the hardware question. Okay, so now I have been launched into Premiere Pro. This is, I believe, the default workspace, and you can customize this any way you want. For me personally, I do have a workspace. I don't know if it actually kept my workspace in here. We're going to take a look and see. Yes. Okay, so I have saved my own workspace, which is what I prefer. This is the one that I'm most comfortable using, but Adobe products want you to customize their space and do it however you feel most comfortable. So in the project panel, I'm going to import the images that I'm going to put into my slideshow. That is the very first step. So right here, I have some images. I don't know if I'm going to use them all, but I'm just going to go ahead and import them all for right now. I do like to have a very clean project file, so I'm going to go ahead and create a bin that is called Photos. And I'm going to dump all of these into that bin so that they are nice and organized. I can also create a bin for music. And then when I download some music from the internet, I can go ahead and import that MP3 and I can save it into that folder right there. So to get started, let's go ahead and drag one of these down. I'm just going to preview them first. So I've got some landscape photos. I've got some portrait photos. I'm going to go ahead and start with, let's start with the landscape photo. And I'm just going to create a new sequence. And I want my new sequence, I'm going to use the digital SLR. I want the 1080p 30 frames per second. That's the one I'm going to be using. Okay. All right. Now now that I've got a sequence, I can create a bin that says sequences. Okay. And I'm going to drag and drop that in there. Okay. Now I'm going to drag and drop my first photo into the workspace. Now you notice, here's the preview of it, and here's what it actually imported. The reason for that is this is a very high resolution image that I took with my professional Canon. So it is a very large photo. So as you're seeing right now, it's not showing the entire one. I might be okay with that. I might want to actually use that to my advantage and do a zoom out with this image first, with my first Ken Burns effect. Or I might want to draw this back to 100% and zoom in. It's entirely up to you where and what type of effects you want to place. So let's go ahead and take a look at the effect controls. We have to click right on the actual image itself. We see the effect controls. This is our scale, our position, all that fun stuff, right? Well, I am going to reposition her just a little bit further up on the screen. I do like the location of where she's at from left to right, so I'm going to leave that alone. However, I'm going to start my first Ken Burns effect. okay? And right now, if you look, it looks like my image is about 5 seconds, which that's pretty much perfect for a slideshow. So I'm gonna leave it at that. And I want to zoom out with this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit the little, it looks like a little clock icon next to scale, okay? That drops my first keyframe. And if you notice right here, we can kind of expand this just a little bit so you guys can see a little bit better. That's our first keyframe. That's our starting keyframe. And that goes by wherever your scrubber is on the timeline. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to go to the very end of that image, and I'm gonna zoom in with my plus and minus sign, zooms in on the timeline. I want to go 1 frame right before this image ends. And then I'm going to change the scale, and I'm going to scale it down because I want to zoom out, right? I don't want to go a whole lot. A very little bit goes a very long way, especially when you're only talking 5 seconds, right? So I'm just going to go down to 75% from 100, and automatically it drops my second keyframe, okay? So now if we go back, I'm going to zoom out a little bit in the timeline here, and I'm going to go back to the beginning, and now I'm going to play it. And as you can see, it is zooming out slowly from that image. Excellent. So I've got one image down. I want to move on to my next image. Okay, so now this one's a portrait. So keep in mind, landscape, of course, images are going to work a lot better, but they're not required. You can use a portrait image if you want. And I'm going to drag and drop that right there in the timeline. I'm going to let it snap right up next to the one I've already done. I'm going to zoom in again because what I want to do is go right at the absolute edge of this first one. Now, what I want to do for this is I do want to go to my effect controls, and I want to zoom out, okay? And I want to wait until I've got right about there. Okay, and I'm going to zoom out just a little bit more. Okay, and I'm kind of moving her up just a touch. Okay, so now for this one, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, but as I zoom in, I kind of want to move the image, because if I zoom in, it's honestly going to zoom in right from the middle of that image, which isn't the focal point. Her face is going to be the focal point. So I am going to want to change the position in addition to changing the scale. So I'm going to go ahead and hit scale and then position. And I'm going to go ahead and find myself at the end of this one right here. And we're going to zoom in again. And I'll go 1 frame before the end here. And you can go to the last frame if you want. It's just you're kind of flying blind because you can't see it. Notice that. But you can add a transition later on, which I'll show you in a little bit. Okay, so now what we want to do, we want to click on this one more time. And now I want to zoom in. So I'm going from 35 scale. I'm going to go up to about 66, it looks like. But notice I'm cutting her head off. So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to move the position down. So now let's check and see what that did. Okay, so if we back up here. So now when it's zooming, it is keeping her head as the focal point, and that's what we want, okay? So now I'm gonna move on to the next one. Let's go ahead and let's do this one right here. Okay, so I'm gonna drop this one right down here into the timeline. And again, it's way too large. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to go to my effect controls. I'm going to zoom out probably right about there. Let's see. I want to cut it off. Okay, I'm going to move this. Let's zoom in a little bit. Sorry, I'm kind of messing with both the position and the scale just to get it just right. Okay. So I like this as a starting point because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pan from right to left. Okay. So for this one, while we're selected, I'm not going to scale it up. I'm not going to zoom. So I'm not going to touch the start position on scale. I'm only going to hit position this time. And then I'm going to go all the way to the end of that image, and I'm going to zoom in so I make sure I'm getting just one frame before. Okay. And then I am going to move this from the right to the left, just like so. Okay. Hopefully that wasn't too much. We're going to zoom out and see. Let's take a look. No, that's a pretty good speed. Now, what happens if you don't like the speed? What do you do? Okay, this is a common issue because keyframes can be very confusing when you're first using them. So what I'm going to do is I want to get myself back to that original location of this keyframe right here. And you can do one of two things. You can either, while this is selected, you can go ahead and change the position again, and it will relocate that keyframe to the new position. Or while it's selected, you can delete that keyframe and just redo it. Either one, they both work. Okay, so I can hit delete and I can delete that keyframe. Okay, and then it's going to bring her back to the original position, right? But my scrubber is still in the right position. So then I can again move her to where I want her to be, right? And then I can leave it there. Or I can select this and I can change this. Like maybe I moved her a little too far, so I can move her back a little bit. Okay, but the key of it is you have to be in the exact position and selected on the keyframe you want to change. That is probably the most confusing part about it. All right, let's zoom out. Let's see how we did here. Okay. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. All right, let's get another one. We'll pick this one and we'll drop this one down. Okay, and this one, let's go ahead and let's take a look at it. Okay. So for this one, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, but the key is I really kind of want to go from bottom to top. So I'm going to kind of like move her over here, keeping on the left side, kind of consistent with where I left off on the last image. But I want to move it from bottom to top, okay? And maybe scale it out just a little bit, actually. So I might do both. So let's get our scrubber in the right position, because that is definitely not the right position. I want to go all the way to the very first frame of that image. I'm going to hit both scale and position, okay? And this time I'm going to scale down just a touch. Okay, so let me put myself in the right position here. So we got the first keyframe selected. Now we're going to go to the last, right before the end. And now I'm going to scale out just a touch, and we're going to move the position up to the top like that. Okay, so now let's take a look and see what effect that had. Okay, so see, it's kind of zooming out while it's going up at the same time. So that's kind of a cool effect, right? Okay, so how many do I have here? I've got 4. We need one more. All right, let's do the final image. Okay, so this one's more of a close-up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out until I do not see black bars. Let's see. Which is about 36 right there %. So now that I've scaled out and I'm in the position, my starting position that I want, I have laid my first keyframes by being putting my scrubber at the very beginning and hitting both scale and position. Now I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to go to the very second to last frame. So right about there. Okay. And now what I want to do is I want to scale this up to about 45. And I want to move her into the center. Right about there. Let's go to 47. Okay. Right about there. Okay, so now let's take a look at it. Okay, that's perfect. So that's a good ending effect. Okay, now that I have added all of the Ken Burns effects, I'm now going to add transitions. So I'm going to select all of the photos in my video. My default transition, if you notice the little blue square around cross dissolve, that indicates that that is the default. In order to apply the default to all of these at the same time, on a Mac, I'm going to do Command D. I believe it's Control D on a PC. And that will automatically put the cross dissolve, because what that does now, if we go to the beginning and we play this from the beginning, and I'm going to hit the tilde so I can get full screen. Okay, so what that does is it cross dissolves into the next image, so it kind of takes away from the fact that I didn't bring the keyframes all the way to the absolute last frame. It's like the frame right before the last. So that's how it's going to look. All right, the next step that you would do that I'm actually going to skip is you would go ahead and download music from a royalty-free site. You would import that MP3 file for the music into your timeline or into your project right here. Then you would drag and drop that music right here onto your timeline. And if the music, you know, I'm sure it's probably more than 25 seconds. So if that's the case, you're going to change the length of it and bring it down to whatever the length of your video becomes. So for mine, it's 25 seconds. So I would bring it all the way down to 25 seconds. Once your music is done, you can also do a fade in and a fade out the same way that we did the cross dissolve. And then we're ready to export. So the best way that I like to export is I like to use Adobe Media Encoder. And the way I do that is I go to the export media and I give this a name. And I select where I want to put it. I'm always going to use an MP4 format, which is H.264. I'm leaving it at match source for the preset. You can also choose high quality 1080p HD if you wish. There's a lot of different presets that you can use, but those are the two that I use the most. And then for me, what I would be doing is sending it to the Adobe Media Encoder. And the reason that I do that is because I can go ahead back to Premiere Pro and I can continue to work while my project is being exported. I can't render anything in Premiere Pro because if I start rendering something in Premiere Pro, it actually will stop the export process. It will just pause it and you know, wait for it to be done. So you don't want to render anything, but you can go ahead and hit the green arrow to start the process and get this exported, and then minimize this and go back to Premiere Pro and keep working. So that is pretty much what I recommend. Hopefully this helps clear up any questions that you might have had about keyframes or creating the slideshow in Premiere Pro. Hope everybody has a great day. Bye.